It was around 10 at night. I was getting tired, driving home from a long day of monotonous office work. My eyes couldn't take the bright city lights anymore. I had to go somewhere else. That's when I decided to turn down a dimly lit alley. At least my headlights provided some light a few feet in front of me. It wasn't long until I came across something suspicious. A sign with GameStop, written in crayon by who I assume was a 4-year-old girl, since it was both barely legible and rather cute. I knew this was a legit place worth checking out. Even if I never found an appealing game for my browsing, I would probably at least get to meet the daughter of this store's owner, who would share my common interests in pony wonders. As I walked in, I noticed that there were no games on shelves like I was expecting. There was only one dim light, revealing a creepy old man with an insanely long beard in the back of the room. He smiled at me and asked, "You looking for something?" I was nervous, unsure of what to ask him, but I eventually mustered up the courage to say, "I was looking for some games to play on my Wii U, but I don't see any. So can I see your pony-loving daughter instead?" The man's smile turned into a devilish grin as he told me, "Oh, I'll give you both of your desires in one package. Here." At this point, he handed me what looked like a cardboard brown version of a Wii U game case. The game's name was Cheese. That's right, just plain cheese. Nothing else to it. Every letter had blood dripping from it. In fact, every part of the Wii U logo was dripping blood as well. Since I didn't find this slightly suspicious at all, I first asked him, "Well, what about my chance to speak with your daughter?" "Well, I can't allow that to happen today," he replied in a monotone manner. Slightly confused, I decided to drop the subject as I wouldn't get any further and asked him about the price of the game. He told me it was a very well-made game that usually only sold for $599 US, but since I was his only customer for the day, I would get it for the low price of $598 US. That seemed pretty steep to me, as I'm only getting one game rather than an entire system, but I paid for it in cash regardless. I mean, what else could I have done with that money? It's not like I could have taken a nice, well-deserved vacation from my crappy job, or bought some gifts for some of my relatives or anything. That would have been stupid. I drove home, hoping to get some sleep, but I soon learned that was futile, as I couldn't stop thinking about this cheese game. I soon stuck the disc into my Wii U, anticipating many great miracles to come from this expensive masterpiece. Pretty soon, I regretted even booting the game up. As I tapped the icon on my gamepad that looked like a block of cheese, the loading screen appeared with the same bloody title, just like on my box. What was stranger here was the blood was hyper-realistic. In fact, even the black space behind it was hyper-realistic. How is that even possible? Well, I have no idea. It was just so realistic, all right? As for the loading screen's background music, it was just a looping version of a very familiar song, but with a ton of static. It sounded like this. I'll let that keep playing so you get a feel for how creeped out I was by this game. Now, let's continue with this grand adventure that's 100% real. I didn't notice the game had transitioned to the title screen 30 minutes ago. I only figured it out when I noticed only one option appear below the title: Die. It seemed weird that I could only choose one option. That didn't even seem remotely close to a start option. Despite this, I pressed on anyway as a random thought occurred in my head that I'd get a cookie if I played through this for a few minutes. Man, that was definitely tempting. I really love cookies, so this was naturally what encouraged me to press on. I hit die, and I was instantly hit with a ton of blood-curdling screams, as many disturbing images flashed across my TV screen. There was Mario, all cut up and guts on the floor in front of him, dripping a ton of hyper-realistic blood. The next image was that of my sister, who had an eye cut out with more hyperrealistic blood flowing from it. It didn't just stop there. My own face was shown with a broken skull and a brain that sagged out in a hyper-realistic manner. At this point, the disk drive on my Wii U was also pouring tons of hyper-realistic blood as well, forming a small red swimming pool for the many ants in my house. What happened next was truly the most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my entire life. An image of Pinkie Pie, my favorite pink pony from Friendship is Magic, flashed across my screen in a hyper-realistic manner. She had hyper-realistic eyes, a hyper-realistic terrified expression, and even more hyper-realistic guts torn out from her abdomen. Of course, we can't forget about all the hyper-realistic blood, right? On top of that, hyper-realistic cupcakes rested on her guts. Man, those looked appetizing, but I wasn't sure what I would do. Pretty soon, Pinkie's eyes turned and stared directly at me. I know I've said this a lot, but the way she looked at me was so hyper-realistic that it seemed as if someone real was looking at me. Next thing I know, I see her crawling out of my TV, ready to use her guts as a whip of some sort. I made a mad dash for the door at the end of my house, only to find that it was locked. Luckily, I could break through a window and save myself that way, so I did exactly that. The glass gave way easily, cutting me up in several areas on my body. I thought I was done with this horror, but then I realized that I had jumped from the top floor of my current hotel, and I was now plummeting to my death anyway. I gave up all hope and waited for the inevitable to come. Surprisingly, it didn't end like I thought it would. I was safe on the ground. I wasn't sure how it happened, but I was glad I could at least live a little longer. I tried to get up, but I found that my feet were tied together by something slimy and bloody. I realized that this was the same gut whip that Pinkie Pie had tried to use on me earlier. She was standing over my feet with such an eerie grin. When she suddenly loosened her grip on my feet, I tried to run away as fast as I could, but her gut whip had caught a hold of my neck and suffocated me within a matter of seconds. There was no denying it now. My life as I knew it was over. Now I'm talking to you from the afterlife. I met up with the creepy GameStop owner's daughter here. She didn't really seem human at all, but I guess that's just what happens when you die and end up going somewhere else. I told her about the terrifying experience I had with Pinkie Pie earlier, but she simply told me that I needed to be convinced to join her realm. I was apparently destined to be here for a specific purpose, so there was only one thing I could say to her. Thank you, Twilight Sparkle. As a final note for anyone that may be watching this, especially Mutahar from Some Ordinary Gamers, I would recommend that you go pick up this copy of this expensive cheese game. It is totally worth every penny that you pay for it, and you may even land yourself in Equestria.